Hi, everyone. My name is Ben Greiner, Director of Apple Technology at Ntiva. And normally with me would be Ross Matsuda, our Systems Administrator. However, he is out sick today. He did test positive for COVID, and we wish him well, and I'm sure he'll be back to work soon. Let's see, let's get right into it. You can see my screen. If anyone cannot see my screen, since I don't have Ross here to verify, please raise your hand or chat me in the chat box or the Q&A box. And I'm going to pull these up, so hopefully I can multitask enough to answer any questions. So, and because Ross isn't here, I do encourage you to send me some questions. Thanks. Today's topic is Microsoft and Apple love. And one of the reasons I want to talk about this is because so often I sit in meetings introduced as the Apple guy, the Director of Apple Technology here at Ntiva. And sometimes comments are made like, oh, you probably don't like Microsoft. And that really is not the case. In fact, I live in a Microsoft world. I use Microsoft apps. And I want to talk more about that. But before we do, let's get into just some quick news. First off, Apple does have a special event coming up a half hour after we end here at 10 p.m. Pacific time, noon Central time. And there's a special event. We'll learn all about it. I was really hoping they would have this event yesterday so we could talk about it today, but that's okay. We'll talk about it next time. So one of the things I want to mention for Ntiva clients is be prepared for some security announcements related to File Vault. And we have this new K-Base article here. Basically, what we're going to do is in VisionBot, we're going to start alerting in yellow if you have a computer that is 4 years or newer, 4 years old or newer, and is running the most recent or previous operating system. And it's a notebook. Those are the three criteria. It's 4 years or newer. It's running a recent or fairly recent operating system, and it's a notebook. We're going to show you in VisionBot that as a yellow warning sign that those computers really should be encrypted with File Vault. So basically what we're doing is instead of asking our clients to File Vault, we want to get to a point where you opt out of File Vault if you have a business use case. So rather than trying to get people to opt into File Vault, we're going to reverse it and ask people to, opt out of File Vault. But of course, we want to do that with communication and with time to prepare. So the first step is to show you what machines would be affected if we were to enable File Vault and give you an opportunity to share with your team what to expect. So here's a great write-up, prepare your team for File Vault. We have an email template you can share with your team, letting them know what to expect. And basically what to expect is they will see a pop-up that says your administrator requires that you enable File Vault. Apple is very much about opt-in, ask permission, or they're very much about getting permission before and making changes. So we alert the person sitting at the machine, they see the pop-up, and then they're asked to enable now, which they would then enter their password to prove that they can authenticate for File Vault and unlock the disk. This happens at a restart when they log in or log out. So this pop-up will not happen in the middle of the day or in the middle of the meeting, only when they log out or restart. And that's why we think it's important to encourage them to do this. And there could be issues. There could occasionally, not issues with File Vault slowing down the machine. That's an old issue with old computers. And that's why we're being very conservative with only the newer machines. But there could be issues where occasionally, rare cases where they try to enable it and it simply doesn't work. And that's where we may need to manually enable File Vault, or we may need to repair File Vault permissions. That's a different conversation. The first step is identify the machines that need it, notify your team what's coming, and when you tell us you're ready is when we'll activate it. So ongoing communication, if Ross was here, he could I'm sure he could explain it better than me. but I wanted to give you a heads up. So that's the security news of the day. I also wanted to mention, because our last webinar was about security. If you haven't seen it, you can go online and watch the recording. And then last month, there was this great article from the can I say this right? Eclectic Light Company, and that's eclecticlight.co. And there's a great article about what Mac does just by default to protect you. So I thought that was an interesting read, and encourage everyone to, if you're interested, go out and look at that. Okay, Microsoft and Apple love. Again, please send me any questions so we can make this more interactive. But first, going back to what I said earlier, a lot of people saying, oh, Ben, you probably don't like Microsoft. I actually think Microsoft has done a really great job of building Apple apps. And they started with the iPhone. I think they realized in order to, capture some of that market share, they needed to be friendly and play well on the iPhone. So they started on the iPhone, and then they moved to the iPad, making iPad specific apps. And they've always been on the Mac, but I will say the Mac has a long history of some frustrations, right? But the Mac apps are very good today. Microsoft has done a great job of unifying their code base, making all of their apps very much on par with the Windows equivalents. And I think there's only one app that I'm aware of, Microsoft Access, which is like their more robust, really pro level Excel version, database version. I'm not the one to ask, because I don't use it, because it only runs on a Windows machine, but I've never had a need to use it. This is an image of the apps that live on my machine, and I've highlighted the three that I live in every day. So I use Microsoft Edge as my primary browser because I had some frustrations with Safari, and Edge is based on Chromium, and it works really well with the Microsoft world that I live in. So I moved to Edge to give it a try, and I stayed with it. It stuck with me. So if you haven't yet tried it out, definitely give it a go. It's a free download, Microsoft Edge. I do have Excel on my computer, and I do use it occasionally, but I tend to live in the Edge browser and open Excel sheets online because I'm not a heavy user of Excel, mostly just for viewing. So I do occasionally open the app, but I also open most Excel files online. OneNote, I have OneNote on my machine. I have tried to adopt it. I have struggled with it, and it's not my favorite app. I hear it's gotten better. Maybe I should try it again. If anyone out here is using it, I'd love your feedback. But I currently, even though it's on my computer, I kind of ignore it. Microsoft Outlook, I live in that, every day, like a lot of us today. I get a lot of email, and I want to talk more about the different versions of Outlook and some things I learned about Outlook when in preparing for this presentation. Microsoft PowerPoint, it's on my machine. I rarely use it. This is done in Keynote. I prefer Keynote, but sometimes it's helpful if someone sends you a PowerPoint file to open it up. So I do have it on my machine. Microsoft Teams, this is another one that I pretty much, I'm in Teams or Outlook or Edge. I mean, these are the apps that I live in every day. And we'll get more into Teams and what we do with Teams. We were a big Slack adopter early on when Slack came out. Teams is essentially, let's admit it, a ripoff of Slack. It's not the best ripoff. Slack is still probably feels faster and more intuitive, but Microsoft's done a great job of integrating Slack-like features into Teams and really making it a hub, not just for all of their apps, but also for communication, for webinars, for web meetings, for phone calls. We now use Teams as our primary phone. Microsoft To Do, I have played around with. I'm not a strong adopter or user of it, but I do think it's a nice app. And then Microsoft Word, of course, the standard. Again, I use it on my desktop, but I also mostly use it online. Okay, so I want to talk a little bit about Outlook online or desktop. I will say in an ideal world, we would use Outlook online, much like Google expects you to use their email online. They don't have an app. Outlook has gotten much better online, and some features are only available online, at least on the, if you live in the Mac world. But I have tried to do this over and over again, and I always revert back to the desktop. And maybe it's my age. Maybe I will always use the desktop version. But I've tried doing this, and I always revert to the desktop. And I also want to mention, for those of you that live in the Apple ecosystem, if you're using Apple Mail with Exchange 365, anything Microsoft related, I would encourage you to seriously consider switching to Outlook. Technically, the Mac Mail and Calendar can connect to 365 to Microsoft, but you're going to have a much better and integrated experience if you use the native Microsoft app. So I do encourage clients, if they're on the Microsoft ecosystem, to use the Microsoft client. And I love the client on the iPhone and the iPad. It works great. And then of course I use it on my Mac OS. So you can try them both out. And you can switch back and forth. It's not like you have to commit to one, but I do spend most of my time on the desktop. And I think the very day I sat down to do some preparation for this, Outlook came out with a new feature. And if you go to the Outlook preferences under composing, you will see the option to send a message up to 20 seconds after you've hit send. Now, we've had for a long time the ability to schedule a message. So you could write a message and schedule it for tomorrow, later tonight, later today. But this is by default. I just said, you know what, that sounds like a good idea. If I hit send and within 20 seconds, I'm like, oh wait, maybe I want to double check that. Maybe I made a mistake. Maybe I just want to, not send that. I think we've all been there where we're like, oh, did I just send that to the wrong person, or I didn't mean to hit send and I accidentally did. Too late. This gives me a 20-second buffer. So you hit send, it actually sits there for 20 seconds before it sends it. So you can always go in and cancel it. So that is a brand new feature. And I believe that is only available if you're using the new version of Microsoft Outlook for Mac. So there are two versions. There's the legacy version and there's the new version. And I know when it first came out, I tried the new version. It wasn't feature, all the features were not there. So I had to revert to the old version. I tried it again. I used it for like maybe 2 days this time instead of 2 hours. And again, I was missing a feature. I reverted back. It was the third time, several months after they released it, that everything was there. Everything that I needed was there, and I continued to use it. And I really love it. And I will not go back to the old version. In fact, they still have the option to go back to the old version, but they have hidden it. So it used to be a very big slider button, new version, old version. Now it's kind of hidden. So if you really need to go back to the old version, you technically still can. But I encourage you to march ahead with the new version. So as I was doing my preparation and research, I realized that my Outlook was starting to feel slow. And I know back in the years ago, one of the ways to increase the speed of Outlook was to clean it up. Like anything, if you have too many messages, it will bog down the processing of the application. Now, applications have gotten smarter and more efficient, and we've come a long way with email clients. But I still believe, in my experience, that if you do some cleanup, the app's going to run better. So I thought, well, this should be pretty easy. I don't want to empty my entire trash can, which is certainly possible on the desktop app. You can right-click the trash can and say empty, and it will empty permanently your entire trash. I only wanted to empty anything 12 months or older. So I finally found it. It was surprisingly frustrating for me for a few minutes, but I had to go online, outlook.office.com, under settings, general, storage, and then if you click the caret next to empty, you will see the option for empty all 3 months, 6 months, or 12 months. I chose 12 months, and you can see here I had 12.5 21.3 gigs, 92,000 messages in my trash. And it prompted me, are you sure you want to permanently delete all 12 months and older? So I said, yes, okay. And then it did take a while, and I didn't need to stay here for that to happen. I continued to work and I left this page, but when I came back to it, it was done, and it did take a long time. And this is something else. Do not, even if you want to do cleanup in the desktop app, because that's the app you use, I encourage you to do the cleanup online. It's so much easier and more efficient and faster. And I have seen the Outlook client struggle, because basically you're making massive changes from a client, sending instructions to the server is making the changes, sending it back to the client. And sometimes the client, at least it feels like the client, becomes overwhelmed and they can't keep up with the processing, and it may crash. It may not send the instructions because there's too much activity. I don't know why, but it doesn't work well. Go online and do it, and then restart or keep Outlook closed while you're making changes. When you relaunch, Outlook will get the new instructions and everything will be great. So I'm down to 5 gigs. And where are my notes? I know, view. I thought I had my notes ready. I lost them. Okay, well, moving on. I don't have my notes, but I had some calculations that I could share, but we'll skip that part. But yeah, I went from here. I went from 12 gigs to 5 gigs and 92,000, 27,000 messages in my trash. Now, obviously, that means I can't go back to a message that I deleted over a year ago, but I deleted it for a reason. It's over a year old. I don't need it. So old versus new Outlook. I talked about this, and one of the things I noticed in trying to clean up my Outlook is that there was this little button in my accounts area. It's it's in Outlook Tools Accounts. There's a little button that says free up space. Now, if you don't have that button, that means you've already done this, or maybe you started with the new Outlook from the beginning on a new computer and you didn't migrate your old Outlook. But basically what this is doing, it pops up this message here that says this account in new Outlook will not be affected, right? I'm not making any changes to my current Outlook. However, all mailbox items from this account in legacy Outlook will be removed from your computer. Items synced to the mail server will not be affected. So essentially Outlook, because they allow you to switch to the new, and if you don't like it, switch back, and you can go back and forth. Not that I recommend doing that very often, but you can technically go back and forth. The way it does that is it has 2 separate databases. So essentially when you free up space and commit to that new Outlook, you have the option to delete the old Outlook. And that's what I did. And the next one, yeah, so the next step was, it said signing out, because it needed to sign out of my account. And this might take a while. Do not quit Outlook or shut down your computer until after the account is signed out. I don't know why that's so important, but I followed the instructions, and it did take a long time. I seem to remember it was not a fast process. So I let that sit. You know, I did other things on the computer, but I left that going, and eventually, and this is a hidden folder, so I had to dig deep to find this. Not that you need to do this, but I went from 21.3 gigs in my Outlook folder to 5.3 gigs. So essentially, between these 2 processes of eliminating my old Outlook and deleting my old deleted items, trash messages, I saved almost 30 gigs of data, which I think is about 12% of my hard drive. So that's quite significant. And then that helps my hard drive too, because now I have more space available. So yeah, these are things that I've shared with our team, because I did not know about them. I just discovered them, and hopefully that's helpful for all of you listening. So I want to talk a little bit about Teams and the Teams apps that we use, because if first of all, if you're in the Apple or the Microsoft ecosystem and you're not using Teams, give it a try. And if you're using Slack, the reason we moved from Slack to Teams, even though we love Slack, was, we didn't want to pay for Slack when we were essentially already paying for Teams. Now, Teams is bundled with Microsoft, the Microsoft Suite 365. Nearly every license today, I think, of 365 gets a version of Teams. That may have changed. I'm not completely up on the licensing of Microsoft, but I do know that as a small business, I didn't want to have the additional expense of Slack. And if you don't pay for Slack, then you don't have your infinite history of messages. You only have, I think, it used to be the last 10,000 messages. They might have changed that since last time I looked. But with Teams, we were able to get all of the features of Slack, even though it takes some adjusting. We had to, the team was not, our team was not fully in love with the move from Slack to Teams, but we did get used to it. It was a cost-cutting measure. And really, Teams has become much more robust and feature-rich over the last several years. So it just seems like an indispensable tool for us now. In addition, not just with communication, they have the ability to add apps, and much like Slack. And we added Teamwork, which is our checklist app. So while we're in Teams, we can reference and work through checklist. We also added OneNote, even though I said I'm not a big user of OneNote. Some of our team members are. So we added OneNote for quick referencing information. And there are a lot of apps here, including Sharepoint and Sharepoint pages. And I want to show you a little bit about that, because that's something that you may not know about, but it's something that we use a lot. So explore your apps in Teams. If you can have easy access to messages, to your calendar, which Teams gives you, to your phone, which Teams gives you if you have a phone license, and you can get that through us if you're an Ntiva client. And then, of course, files for OneDrive. That was one of the apps I forgot to mention. OneDrive is an app I use, although I tend to use it more online and through Teams, and not so much on the desktop. Task, I've been playing around with Task, but I'm not a heavy user of that. And then Insights is interesting, but once again, it's not something that I rely on or live in every day. Okay, so the Sharepoint page. If you have an Office 365 subscription, I think, once again, nearly all the subscriptions, except for maybe the really basic email only subscriptions, you should also have a SharePoint option. And SharePoint is the back end of OneDrive. OneDrive is the name that we kind of all know through Mac OS. OneDrive is our file share on the cloud in Office 365, and it's powered by SharePoint. And you can think of OneDrive as being like your personal drive, and SharePoint being the drive that is shared across the company, or has the ability to share across your company. So we created a Apple resource page for sales and account managers, and we put some helpful links here, and we have sales tools, PDFs, additional links, some information. And the reason I want to show this is I'm not a web designer. I don't know how to code, but I built this in SharePoint. So this is very much drag and drop, WYSIWYG, build it, edit it, continue to iterate on it, share it with your team. And it's a great way to just consolidate information and get it out there. This is not for public consumption. It's not meant to be a public website. It's like an internal, I don't know if we can call it a wiki or just a giant blank on the intranet, I think is the term I was thinking of. So I definitely encourage you to check that out if you haven't. And in fact, that's one of the challenges of Microsoft, is it is so deep in the features. It's so feature rich that you do need to spend some time learning the options, and they're coming out with features every day. So don't feel overwhelmed. Just try some of this stuff. And the other thing that we use a lot is forms. Microsoft has a forms feature, and I just discovered that it is possible to share a form as a template. So I've talked about some of the forms we've created. If anyone's interested in those forms, let me know. And I believe I can share those with you as a template. And one of those is we have a employee choice program, and the employee choice program has a form asking someone who's interested in a MAC in your organization some questions, so you can kind of quickly figure out if they're a good candidate for a Mac, especially if they're switching from Windows PC to a Mac, or if you just want to get your employee choice program started and get some feedback on it. Those forms are great, and I can share those forms as a template. So just let me know. Okay, so we're wrapping up a little early because we didn't have Ross to add some commentary, and our next one will be October 5th. And we don't have it on our website. I couldn't find my notes, so I can't remember what the topic is. I know I've mapped out all the topics for the year, so we have it on the list. I just don't remember what it is. If you want to hear us talk about something, please email me. Go to our website, fill out the information form if you don't know how to get a hold of me, and I'll add that to the list of topics that we want to discuss. Apple does have their big announcement in a half hour, and I don't like to speculate around what they're going to talk about. I'll leave that up to the news cycle. I prefer to just watch the recording, and I'll be doing that to learn about Apple's new announcements. And I do think it's important that when I read the follow-up articles in the news about Apple announcements, you can often tell who actually watched the show versus who maybe read the highlights and wrote an article about it, because they really do explain their motivation and reasoning behind why they do things. And I think that's really interesting. Thanks for joining me, and I'll see you next month. Bye.